Field, the gap between good and great can come down to a few hundredths of a second. In no other sport are the margins to greatness so fine.
Certainly, you got to have a talent. You know, the difference between good and great usually is it's some work.
You have to have some God-given speed.
You have to have a big heart, and you have to be mentally ready, tough, and like I say, have the heart of a lion.
Few athletes have possessed these qualities more than Carl Lewis. With his unique combination of talent and personality, he redefined his sport.
Carl was blessed with a great deal of talent. He had it all.
The combination of his mind and his body, you don't find very many people like that. He is phenomenal.
On July the 29th, 1996, Carl Lewis entered the history books with this jump. He equaled the then Olympic record of 9 gold medals by winning his 4th long jump title. At the age of 35, America's greatest ever athlete was now an Olympic legend.
He done it and took care of his body and ate right and done the things he had to do to still compete. And that's why he was an inspiration to me, because he was still giving some of these young guys the business.
We weren't looking for world records. We were only looking for winning and longevity, you know, with him. He was a great athlete, and he knew where he wanted to go, and he went there and didn't let anything major come in between him and his goals.
Frederick Carlton Lewis was born in 1961, the youngest son of a sports-mad family. It was at Willingboro High School in New Jersey that he showed his initial potential.
Not a strong-looking kid, looked immature to me, but he had all the indication that he was going to be a good sprinter. And then I just forgot about him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know whether he long jumped or anything, but I just remember him.
By the time he graduated from high school, Carl Lewis was one of the hottest properties in athletics. But it was the unlikely setting of Houston, Texas, that would play center stage to the aspiring long jumper and sprinter. Athletics coach Tom Tellez persuaded Lewis to join him at the University of Houston.
I couldn't believe it. I just about dropped when he said he was interested. I called him again and I said, well, how do you feel about the visit? And he said, I'm coming. Just like that, I'm coming.
The move to Houston was perfect for Lewis. He established himself as one of the most talented up-and-coming figures in US track and field. But it would take time for him to develop as a sprinter.
I was not interested in his sprinting ability. I said, if you want to run on the relays, it's up to you. If you want to sprint, that's up to you. I just want you to long jump. That's what I want you to do here.
I pretty much seen Carl as a long jumper, although he could sprint. I would outrun Carl in the 100 meters with no problem. And to me, you know, Carl, his sophomore year, Carl started running very fast. From that point on, you know, Carl was moving. So, yeah, I found myself chasing the guy who I thought was a long jumper.
Lewis had made the US team for the 1980 Olympics, but America's subsequent boycott of the Games meant he would have to wait to gain international recognition. In 1982, he broke through, becoming the world's best long jumper and a real force in the 100 meters.
The secret was that he's an outstanding athlete. He's got a great mind for an athlete. He was a great kid to coach, unbelievable kid to coach. He did everything I asked him to do. He could simplify everything I told him to and then go out and execute it. Just like that, he could execute. I think the difference is his commitment, total commitment to the sport, his vision of where he wanted to go, and he would not let anything interfere with that.
In 1983, as the World Championships in Helsinki approached, Lewis had proved himself more than just a long jumper. His rivalry with 100-meter world record holder and US teammate Calvin Smith was just beginning.
We definitely was not teammates or anything of that nature. You know, running Against Carl, one knew that they had to be ready to go.
Smith may have felt he could match his rival, but there was only going to be one winner in Helsinki. Lewis powered home to become the inaugural World 100-metre champion. It was his mentality that was most impressive, though. Here was a young athlete going for gold in 3 events, utterly fearless.
Well, I don't think there's any pressure. I mean, I think the only pressure, if there is some in my life, would be not to compete my events because I'm competing at less of a level. I have expectations of myself. I don't think there's any pressure on me to do anything. I do what I feel happy with, and I wouldn't feel happy with not competing in the 100 and long jump.
Lewis went on to win the long jump and then anchored the 4x100 relay team to gold. It was an unprecedented 3 gold medal haul. Carl Lewis was now the biggest star in the sport of track and field.
I feel very proud. Carl has worked very hard in his time. I don't think that it has gone to his head. I think he is still the same old Carl that he was when he was still at home. But he has come a long ways in terms of his athletic skills in track and field.
But Carl Lewis wanted more. 4 Olympic golds was his target, a feat not achieved since Jesse Owens in 1936.
I never coached anyone that won 4 gold medals. I never talked to Jesse Owens' coach or Jesse Owens about how do you win 4 gold medals. So, I'm flying by the seat of my pants figuring out what we're going to do to win 4 gold medals. I didn't want him to do 4 gold medals, try to win. I just wanted him to win 1, the long jump. I didn't care about anything else.
I kind of felt at the time, but the way Carl had been competing in the long jump, the sprints, I actually thought he could pull it off.
In 1984, the Olympics were on home territory in Los Angeles. The ideal stage for Lewis to join Owens in the record books. The first event to win was the 100 metres. There was no Calvin Smith, and Lewis's main rival, another American, Sam Grady, was brushed aside, along with the rest of the field.
In '84, Grady was a great starter. I mean, he was gone, he was out there, but Carl just ran his own race. Carl knew that he had the ability to accelerate and beat Grady.
With 1 gold secured, next up was Lewis's best event, the long jump. He needed only 1 jump to win. But his decision not to complete his full quota of attempts did his public image no favours.
6 jumps will take a lot out of you. And, and you can get hurt, anything can happen, and then you're not able to run the 200 or the relay, and, there's a lot of things you have to think about.
Set.
If the public weren't amused, the decision to jump only once paid off. Lewis had added the 200 metres to his repertoire since winning 3 golds in 1983. His training partner at Houston, Kirk Baptiste, looked set to end the 4 gold dream, though. But, as he would so often do in his career, Lewis came through in the final stages of the 200 metres.
Carl was pretty much established in the sport. And I think Kurt being a little younger, he looked over and seen King Carl on the outside, and he fell apart. And Carl ended up winning.
With the best sprinters in the world, a US victory in the 4x100 metre relay was a formality. It was fitting that Lewis should anchor the team to glory as he took his place in Olympic history.
I knew that with the 4 of us that we should have no problem coming with winning a gold medal. And that is exactly what we did. And we also set a world record in the process of getting that gold medal. But my main concern was for me and not necessarily what Carl would do.
Well, I feel great because people want to put me up there, but to me, Jesse Owens is a legend. I don't think I can ever match him, and that's special to me because there's somebody that I can always look up to. Well, what's left for me is just to go out respected. Everybody looks up to me right now, and they think that I'm the best thing in track and field. So I just want to prove that I am and to prove that I can help the sport and be a role model.
Olympic champion Carl Lewis.
At just 23, he'd already achieved what some thought near impossible: 4 Olympic gold medals. He could now be rightfully compared to Jesse Owens. Carl Lewis had established himself as a legend in his own right. Despite the presidential reception and subsequent celebrations, it soon became apparent that Lewis was not to everyone's liking. To some, he was every inch the modern superstar athlete, flashy, aloof, arrogant.
I would say, you know, as far as the spotlight, yes, we were definitely at many times in his shadow as far as that goes. I think that one can be a you know, good runner, great runner, and you know, world class and all of that. But I think that attitude and demeanor plays a big part. And I think, I'm going to put that I know from what has been on a number of teams with Carl that he was not a team player.
I can't stay bad. Every time I turn around, I find you there.
Yet those who knew Carl Lewis best recognized he was pushing the boundaries of track and field in the mid-80s. He was attempting to professionalize and glamorize what was still largely an amateur sport.
When he came here as a freshman, I was sitting in my office doing some work, and he walked into my office and he said, "Coach, I don't want to work. I want to be rich running. I want to be rich and I want to make it running." So his mind was on professionalism in track and field.
I mean, you can't help but separate yourself from the group of sprinters when you're the best guy. I think the real issue was Carl was so radical and outside the norm that some of the media just didn't quite know how to handle it.
Supply and demand, you know, and he was worth money and he asked for it. And if he didn't get it, he'd go home, but he got it. And so that raised the level for every track and field runner at that time.
And by Carl pushing those doors open, he allowed other athletes to come through that door without the struggle, and the struggle that we had leading up until the 80s. And a lot of people may say arrogance or self-centered, but Carl knew what he wanted.
But love him or loathe him, the sport couldn't live without him. He brought a new level of tactical awareness to the sprint events. Lewis ran his races in 10-meter phases, calculating every step in order to be the fastest man on the planet.
Carl really got people to look at the sprints a little bit more in a different light, along with Coach Till as our coach. Before Carl, everyone thought you get a great start, you run it as hard as you could, and cross the line, that guy's going to be the winner. And Carl changed the race a little bit, at least 100.
But just as Lewis looked to be untouchable, one man emerged to threaten his place as the world's best. Canadian athlete Ben Johnson was beginning to run very fast. So fast that even Lewis couldn't catch him. No one could.
When Ben Johnson started getting great, then I started to think, wait a second, how can this guy be that great all of a sudden?
The way that he would hop out of the blocks and just go and leave everyone, just basically what he did, was like, wow, this is incredible.
Taking Lewis's 100-meter title in the 1987 World Championships proved that Johnson could do it on the big occasion. It was the first major sprint final Lewis had lost. But publicly, his camp remained unfazed.
First of all, you have to understand a little bit about what our philosophy was on training, is that the Olympic Games was the #1 goal.
And so, at the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, all eyes were on two athletes in the race to become the fastest man on Earth. And what happened in that 100-meter final would shock the world.
That was the first time Carl really went into a race thinking, I don't know if I can win this race or not.
I was, watching the race from the stands, and, they line up and boom, the gun goes off. Man, as soon as the gun went off, Ben had everybody by 4 or 5 meters. And Ben, it was like unreal. Boom, he was flying.
And then Carl, instead of running his own race, looked over and looked at Ben Johnson. You're not really running. And then he went again. And then he looked again at him. He looked twice at him. Maybe 3 times he looked at Ben Johnson instead of running his own race. If he'd have run his own race, I think he'd have been there at the end, because I don't think Ben Johnson was that great of a sprinter.